introduction. Donc je vais parler en anglais parce que mon français n'est pas trop bon. Meet the Future is the title of this talk. Let me just turn this on. Yeah, okay. Something more about me. I come from Belgium. I live in a small or near a small town. We have a sanctuary at home where we save or rescue a couple of hundred, mostly chickens every year, and it's also a place where you can stay if you ever want to be in a safe haven or a safe space, a safe vegan space. That's our B&B where you can stay among the animals. So I'm going to tell a story about animal production and all the actors involved by means of an advertising clip. This is the story of a guy, a very manly guy, and you know that the males, the guys, are the most difficult to convince of eating less meat, and you can see it here in the room. The males are, I estimate, 10%, and the rest is female, so that is very typical. So anyway, this manly guy he has a manly job. He drives a truck, and at a certain moment he hears a message on the radio, and this is a message about the impact of meat on the environment. And can you imagine, or can you guess what he does? He changes the channel. He doesn't want to hear about that, right? He doesn't want to know what the problem is with meat. And we call him David, and I'm just going to go over what exactly he doesn't want to know. And some of you may be quite familiar with these facts, but let me bring them anyway for the people who are not familiar. So basically, this is the problem of animal products. And the problem is threefold. It's first of all about the environment. And environmentally, you cannot think of any environmental problem or animal agriculture is one of the main causes of it, right? So for every major environmental problem, meat or animal products is in the top 3 of the causes. I think you know to what extent animal agriculture is responsible for global warming. You know the percentage of greenhouse gases? It's about 15%, 14.5% of all greenhouse gases is caused by the meat and dairy industry. And yet, if you would take a look at what amount or what percentage of all the money that we invest in combating climate change goes to reducing animal production, it is less than 1%. Less than 1% of all the money we invest actually goes to this cause, right? And still, it is one of the most efficient things to do against climate change. Here you can see in terms of millions of dollars, billions of dollars invested, reducing animal agriculture would give us one of the best results of all the possible things that we could do against climate change. And still we're not doing much, all right? You know where the greenhouse gas emissions come from? It's, among other things, those famous farts and burps of the cows, right, which emit methane, but it's also what we call land use changes. It's also turning forest into pasture, or forest into spaces or ground area where we cultivate feed for animals, right? And if you look at all the land area in the world that we use for animal production, that amounts to a surface area that is as big as the continents of South America. Oops, this is a bit elongated, I see now. South America and Africa together. That is the amount of land that we use for livestock. And the result of that, among other things, is of course a huge loss in biodiversity. If you're going to destroy forest, you're going to have a lot less species. Let me talk briefly about 2 things that are not good solutions. The first one is a shift from red to white meat. And I think you've seen some organizations or instances calling for that. Like I was recently on a plane, and there was only either chicken or vegetarian options. There was no beef. And that's very intentional because beef has the biggest climate impact. So people switch to chicken because it's supposed to have a lower climate impact. And that is true. But what is the problem with that? The problem is that if you want the same amount of meat that you get from one cow, if you want to get that amount of meat, that same volume from chickens, you know how many chickens you need, equivalent? You need 250 chickens, right? So that's a lot more beings suffering and a lot more beings killed. So we cannot sacrifice animals for the sake of the environment. The environment is a problem that we caused. We cannot put it on the animals and sacrifice even more animals. And the second solution that is not a good solution is local foods. Have you heard that solution? Mentioned, I guess, in Switzerland, it's also quite popular, like to talk about let's eat locally. And the thing is that I think that's a good idea, but especially socially. But environmentally, and especially in terms of greenhouse gases, it's not so effective. This is what's called a life cycle analysis, and it represents the greenhouse gas emissions in different stages of the production of a product. And you can see in red there, transportation, you see, there on top. And can you see on the first line where this red comes back? See? It's that small. That is the part that is responsible, or that is the greenhouse gases caused by transportation. So it's almost negligible. So if people say, like, let's eat locally, or if your government says, like, let's focus everything on eating locally, you have to say, I'm sorry, but this is not the priority. This is not the best solution that we can have for tackling climate change. The best solution is actually going from animals to plants, right? The second point, or the second field, is health. Just a couple of things, very briefly. The strongest evidence of the damage that animal products consumption can do is the evidence for the link between animal products and cancer, right? It's especially, again, red animals, red meat, and processed meat, the salami and the sausages and whatever, that are linked to cancer. I think that in a society that is getting older, as Western Europe does, it will be very important to prevent more diseases rather than cure them. We will not be able to continue to pay for all these costs involved in heart diseases and cancer and diabetes. We have to prevent them rather than treat them. That is a lot cheaper in the end. This is from a study, an older study in Germany, that showed that probably around 30% of all health costs was caused by an overconsumption of animal products. 30%, right? So that is very serious. This is another problem that is waiting to happen, that hasn't manifested yet. This is the problem of antibiotics resistance. So we are breeding bacteria and viruses that are resistant against antibiotics. So because in those big staples, the bacteria have a lot of chances to mutate. And also by deforestation, we come in touch with more and more new organisms, new diseases, right? So we're going to face a situation probably in the future where even the most common diseases can no longer be treated by antibiotics. That will be a disaster. And another future problem is pandemics. Right? 3 out of 4 infectious diseases today is caused by contact with animals. Is a zoonosis. Okay? So if we want to do something about reducing the risk of pandemics, we have to also tackle intensive animal farming especially. And the third problem is the one closest to my heart, is the problem of animal suffering and animal rights. And this topic, especially in conferences and in talks about the environment, is always forgotten. It's only mentioned here, when we really talk about animal rights and animal suffering, but otherwise it's forgotten. You know the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations, I think, right? There is no animal welfare in there, anywhere. I mean, there's life below water, number 14, but that is just the idea of like making sure there's enough fish so we can keep on fishing, right? But animal welfare is not part of the topic of environmentalism in general, which is really a big shame, I think. And it's such a big shame that it's ignored because the numbers are so incredible. These are numbers that you just can't imagine. This is the number of animals that get slaughtered for meat in just one day. Just one day worldwide means, for instance, almost 1 million cows and 200 million chickens, just in one day. All animals that have led terrible lives, right? I'm going to show you some pictures. They're a bit graphic, so if you want to look away, you can, but they're not, I don't think they're too graphic. So the problems that we face in terms of animal suffering are not the exceptions, where, I hope they're exceptions, where animals are kicked and treated badly by sadists in some farm, but the problems are structural. Right? The problems happen every day on massive scales. So nobody can say they're exceptions. So there are things like manipulations. So this is where we actually shape an animal so that it is fitting in our system. Right? We change the animal so that it is convenient for us. For instance, debeaking. So the animals are very close to each other, and if we don't want them to peck at each other and there's more deaths and less profit, we have to debeak them. Or for instance, these animals, female pigs, sows, they spend half of their lives in these conditions because then they cannot, like, these are the mothers, and they cannot, like, crush their baby piglets, right? But this is, of course, a very unnatural situation. In nature, they would not crush those piglets. There is the problem, the very structural problem of what we call dropout or fallout. This is the problem of the animals that don't even get to the slaughter date. They die before that. They die, for instance, because they are too lame or too weak to even reach their food or their water. So that is the way that they die. There's one guy that we know who works at a farm like this, and he's responsible for killing these sick animals. And he's kind of like soft-hearted, and he can't. And so every week he brings these animals to us, and so we have a sort of chicken hospital at home. And my girlfriend takes care of these most miserable of the animals, and most of the time she can heal them, and they can be adopted and get a new life. There's also what I would call emotional suffering. What is exceptional about this picture? This is something you never see. This is a chick with their mom. But of course, when a chicken gets born on a farm for eggs or for meat, they are born alone, right? They don't have anybody to guide them. There's no mother there to give them love. Does this mean anything for that chick? I think it would. I think this can have an impact. You're born alone, you don't know what you're doing in the world, nobody to take care of you. There's, of course, the problem of transportation, and there's the problem of slaughter. And a lot of chickens, especially, get slaughtered while being fully conscious. That is not an exception again. I mean, it is an exception in terms of percentage. It's maybe 1 or 2%. But it is literally millions every year in every country, right? The structural problem, I think, is this. We want cheap meat. So in order to have cheap meat, we have to make sure that the animals get very big very quickly, right? Because every day they live longer, they cost more in terms of heating, electricity, food, etc. So what we want is breeds that grow very quick, very fast, and in the past few decades, we have managed to create animals, birds, other animals that really have genes that are very suitable for that. I mean, these ones look even thicker because of the screen proportions, but they basically, in a very short time, get to be adults, physically, right? Do you know how old a chicken is when we eat it, or when other people eat it? Okay. 30 days. Yes, it's a bit more. It's about 6 weeks, and the organic ones maybe 7, 8 weeks, right? So this is basically a very young animal in an adult body. If you compare it to humans, you would have a situation of a boy of like maybe 8 years old that looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? That is the situation that we get. And of course, this fast growth is problematic right? This fast growth leads to all kinds of problems. For instance, the fact that their feet can no longer support them because they're too big. We have turkeys rescued from farms also, and we know that after a while we will have to euthanize the turkeys because at some point they can no longer walk. At some point they're too heavy. So I've explained all these problems, and still I would call animal agriculture a wonderful problem. Why is that? Well, it's because when we tackle this, we get solutions for so many things. I don't know any other product, any other consumer product that is involved in so many different things and so many different solutions, basically, right? So it's the best thing we can address with our time and with our money, basically. How are things looking? Well, the past 50 years, 60 years, meat consumption has been only going up. If we would see a business as usual scenario, then we will see this. Basically because of countries like China and India and other countries that are getting wealthier, and with that comes a higher consumption of animal products, right? And if you think that the meat substitutes are everywhere, and some people think that, some people think like, oh my God, everybody's going vegan, you know? But if you look at the global scale, and you want to see the market share of meat alternatives, the market share is this big. Less than 1% worldwide of meat is meat alternatives. So we have a very long way to go. So let's go back to our guy in the truck who changed the channel. He didn't want to know this. Why doesn't he want to know? Well, he's a stakeholder. He is implicit. He has some interest in not hearing the story. And actually, it would be more correct maybe if we call him a stakeholder, right? Just like all the people who are eating meat are stakeholders. They love something and they don't want to give it up. And when they hear, I don't know if there's meat eaters here in the audience, and if there are, I think it's very good, of course, that you're coming. But basically, most people, when they hear this information, they experience what is called, you may know the term, cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is an annoying feeling in your brain. It's the annoying feeling that happens when your behavior and your beliefs are not aligned. They clash. So you say you care about animals, or animals are important, or they can suffer, but you still continue to eat them, and you know they are in horrible conditions. So what are the responses that people show in this situation? The first one is just to close their eyes. Try not to see it. Try not to come here, right? The second one is adapting your behavior to your beliefs. That is going vegetarian, going vegan, right? Saying animals suffer, I don't want animals to suffer, so I'm going to change my behavior. It's not what most people do, right? What most people do is the opposite, adapting your beliefs to your behavior, right? You want to continue eating meat, so you're going to invent excuses, rationalizations, and you maybe believe in them. You will say things like, it's normal, it's natural, the animals don't feel that, it's all a hoax, it's woke stuff, it's fake news, all kind of excuses that people think of. So, what do we need to solve this and to address this situation? Going back to our guy, he comes home in his personal car, and there his wife is cooking for him, and she has prepared this meat alternative that is being sold in this advertisement. A meat alternative that this guy tastes, he tries it, and he says, it's delicious. And then right after the meal, apparently this guy is emancipated enough to do the dishes, his wife has put the packaging of this meat alternative there, and he picks it up, and he's interested. And can you imagine that maybe the next time he hears news like that on the radio, that maybe next time he won't change the channel. Why is that? Because he's experienced that there's a good alternative. He's experienced that maybe the sacrifice is not that big, right? So most people in animal rights organizations, etc., most people believe that we have to go this way. We have to change attitudes of people. We have to give them facts, and then from there they will change their behavior. Sometimes it happens like that, but most of the time it doesn't. But we have to keep trying this. But we have to also try the other way around. We try to change behavior first, and because behavior changes, because people for some reason try vegan products, all of a sudden it becomes easier to realize that animals are important, etc. It becomes easier to open your heart and your mind because you know there's nothing to be defensive against anymore. You understand? So that is the other way around. So basically, what we need is not this situation, a situation where alternatives are not available enough and they're not good enough and they're too pricey and the taste is not so good. Because then, in this situation, the required effort is quite high. I became vegan 25 years ago. Let me tell you, I had to invest quite some effort. I had to be very motivated because there were not many options around. Right now, we're getting closer, but we're not there, to this situation. The easier it gets, the less effort, of course, and the less motivated people need to be. And most people will not be motivated. So let's make sure that we have a situation where people don't have to make a lot of effort. So that is a situation in which there's a food environment, we call it, that is very conducive, very facilitating for change. And the first thing we need, of course, is all the producers. Alice will talk after me about aspects of being a producer. Production can be all kinds of different things, and I think you may know the difference, for instance, between plant-based and cultivated. Plant-based is on the basis of really plants, like wheat or soy. Cultivated is on the basis of cells, animal cells. So this would be still some kind of animal product, but without any animal needing to be killed. And there's a third category, which is fermentation, which is like beer and like yogurt, where we take, for instance, yeast, and we inject that with something. It's more high-tech, and this way we can create real cow's milk because it contains DNA of cows. Right? So all kinds of different ways, different techniques, like 3D printing, that are technological solutions for a moral problem, basically. And we have seen that in the past, we have solved certain problems that, for me and for people who care about animals, are moral problems. We have solved them with technological alternatives. See, these were cases in which we used animals, and we don't need to use animals for them anymore. I mean, some have been replaced by other problems, of course, alternatives that have their own problems, but basically we could, in the end, create technological solutions for these things. And I'm not saying raising awareness and talking about the issues is not important. I'm just thinking that this has to go together. Creating solutions and raising awareness. And the more solutions you have, the better solutions, the better alternatives you have, the easier it's going to be to raise awareness. And the more people are aware, the more people will consume these products, these alternatives, and they will be more and more profitable, and they will become cheaper, etc. And then there's also, of course, not just the producers, but also the distributors and the retail and the food service that has to help. In Austria, not so long ago, there was this experiment when people were ordering a meat burger or a burger, a Whopper, in this case, of Burger King. They were asked, do you want the normal one or the one with meat? Right? Normal or the one with meat? So this is normalizing veganism, or changing what is normal. What IKEA is doing here too. IKEA is actually one of the biggest restaurants in most countries, actually. People don't know that, but they get a lot of people, customers, to eat there. And they have an objective to make 80% of their offerings plant-based in the next 5 years, I believe. So here they're trying that by lowering the price of this hot dog. Also very encouraging is what Lidl has done. Of course, supermarkets will be glad when they sell more plant-based products, as long as they don't sell less animal-based products, right? But if they don't sell less animal-based products, nothing is gained. Nothing is gained for the environment, nothing is gained for the animals, So Lidl is actually the first one that says we're not just going to try to sell more plant-based, we're also going to try to sell less meat-based products. That is very brave. There should be applauded for that. This is I don't know if you have it here, I think it's a German chain, Penny, who puts next to the price the true price. The price that a product would cost if we calculated the environmental and the health cost in the price. Back to our guy, David, our guy in the truck. He's not vegan yet, but still he is important. Why is he important? Well, he's important because he helps drive change. I compare this to the idea of being gluten-free. So gluten-free people today have a lot more options than they used to have because gluten-free became a hype. And so there were all of a sudden more and more people who demanded gluten-free products, right? Just like in our sphere, there's a small number of vegans and a bigger number of vegetarians, but especially a big number of reducers. You could compare these reducers to the gluten-free people who are following the trend, right? And it is thanks to these meat reducers especially that there's a big choice in products today, right? If you can choose as a vegan between all these kinds of milk, well, you have the reducers to thank. And we know that today, most people who buy meat alternatives, they also buy meat. So they are the primary customers of these meat alternative companies. And the vegans may find it a little bit annoying, but we have to really appreciate what the meat reducers are doing in terms of creating a changing market, of changing supply and demand. Here too, 92% of meals, vegan meals by non-vegans are eaten by non-vegans in the UK, right? So this thing now is everywhere. It's not just vegans anymore, it's many people who are participating in this trend. But now there's a bit of a new problem. The meat industry actually has noticed this. And they're pushing, I don't know if you noticed here, but they're pushing back more than ever before, right? So the result is that you could say that David has doubts. All of a sudden, he's saying something like, this is processed food. Have you heard this criticism here? It's all processed. This is the meat industry that's behind it, right? And there's other arguments that we're hearing today. It's ultra processed. It's bad for the economy to reduce the subsidies for the farmers. It's bad even for the people in the south. These people come up with anything, you know. It's woke or it's for the left. Have you heard that commentary? And it's a failure. Animal meat alternatives are generally a failure. And there's so many articles in the news about how the hype is over. Have you seen them here? And articles like this. And we have to recognize that today the growth is going a bit slower of the sales of meat alternatives, and I think that's mainly because we had very unrealistic expectations. We thought we were already in this incremental stage, but we're still going like this, and it's going to go like this, and it's going to go like this then, and then up again, and then a plateau again. So we have also the economic crisis. We also know that the products still have to become better, become more tastier, etc. But still, we are seeing very good signals. Have you ever heard of JBS? This is the biggest meat producer in the world. And they have invested, I think it is 60 million euros in a company that produces cell-based meat. So they don't do that just for greenwashing or anything. 60 million is a reasonable amount of money. So it is because they believe in that. This is another very big company that is active in the animal feed sector. And they have invested 300 million in setting up a center for alternative proteins. Right? So these are very clear signals. This one too, studied by a very renowned institute, Ernst & Young, that predicts a very big growth for this industry. We see, in the meantime, a very lively landscape of a lot of companies in this space involved in all kinds of different parts. And I don't think anybody can still say that it's a hype. This is only going to grow. But let's go back to the lobbying just very quickly, or to this antagonism from the meat industry. Like I said, I think it's getting bigger than ever. There's one recent study that show that in the United States, there's 180 times as much lobbying money invested in lobbying for meat products, animal products, than for the alternatives, right? And all this lobbying, in Europe it's probably the same thing, all this lobbying has concrete, very negative results. For instance, there's dietary guidelines, national dietary guidelines in every country, where the government tells people how they should eat for a healthy lifestyle. In all cases, these are influenced by the lobby, by the meat and dairy industry. There's the fact, I don't know how it is in Switzerland, but this idea that we cannot call a veggie burger a burger. Have you heard of that? So this failed on the European level. I don't know how Switzerland fits in there. You're always different. But several countries are still trying to make sure that a veggie burger cannot be called a burger. And in terms of milk, it has succeeded. So you can no longer call soy milk milk. You have to call it soy drink. That is because of the dairy lobby. One other very terrible result of the lobbying is that Europe was going to revise its animal welfare regulations. And the things that I talked about, like the sow, the female pig in the crate, that was going to be abolished. But now they are putting this ahead of them and have postponed this indefinitely because of lobbying, right? Another consequence of lobbying is that this very unbalanced situation with subsidies, European subsidies, continues to exist. This is the difference. 1,200 times as much money in subsidies going to animal products than to going to the alternatives, the plant-based products. And finally, another result is that also the media might be biased, right? So you have, if you look at one research that looked at articles about climate change, animal agriculture was mentioned as a cause of climate change in less than 0.5% of the cases. 0.5% of the articles mentioned animal agriculture as the cause. So with all this lobbying, I think that our man needs his government. And many people are against governments meddling with our food. I think that we need governments meddling with our food because we have all these companies throwing all kinds of like advertisements for unhealthy, unsustainable, uncompassionate food at us. And most people can't say no to that. Most people need to be helped by their government. And they could cut subsidies, increase taxes on animal products, subsidize the alt protein industry, etc. And they're starting to do that. Over the last 4 years or so, governments have invested $1 billion in alt protein products. $1 billion may sound like a lot, but if you compare it to what one country, the United States, has given in terms of subsidies in 1 year to the sustainable transportation and sustainable energy transition, that is 350 billion. 350 times as much for one country in 1 year, right? So we need to convince governments that they have to take the protein transition as seriously as the energy transition. And then I think it will be a game changer. But in the meantime, Europe is still doing things like this. This is a campaign that wants to tell people to eat more meat. And this is sponsored by the European Union, right? So we, with ProVeg, the organization I work for, have tried to make people aware of this in Brussels. So Europe on the one hand says this, but on the other hand says that. And I come to the final part, the final stakeholders in this story, NGOs, also like Swissveg and the Animal group, Animal Rights group that's active here at the university, and just citizens, and also including you. We could wait, of course, for another generation. This is David, who is going to make a baby tonight with his wife. And that baby probably is going to be still more aware than this generation, let alone the last generation. Do you know how the next generation is called? The people who are born after 2012? So you have Gen Z and Gen Y and whatever. The people born after 2012 are called Generation Alpha. And these people apparently are not eating meat to the extent of 21 to 34%. 20 to 34% of them is not eating meat. So all of us today can wait and can say, like, I'm going to just continue eating meat till the still younger people take care of it, or till the best solution, the cell-based solutions are there, till we have real meat that we can eat without animal suffering. But of course, that's not what I would recommend. I recommend everybody to change their consumption, first of all, to be as vegan as you can. There's different apps to help you, not international yet, but this is an app that we have developed. It's important when you change your diet to not think in black and white. It's not just vegan and not vegan, right? It's not when you're not vegan that you're part of the solution, that you're part of the problem, and you're vegan, you're part of the solution. If you are reducing, I think, to a significant extent, that is already very helpful. But of course, the further you go, the better. And again, if I could do it 25 years ago, anybody can do it today. And I was a big meat eater back then. The second, apart from changing your own advocacy, is apart from changing your behavior, is also your advocacy. The things you say, the things you do to try to change other people. That has an even bigger effect. And you could do all kinds of things. And I think, for instance, if you are at this university, you could participate in this campaign, Plant-Based Universities, campaign from England, that is trying to, it's groups of people, students, trying to convince their university to go entirely plant-based. This is not the same as making everybody vegan at that university. People can still eat whatever they want at home, but in the cafeteria, the idea is that no animal products get served there. And if you want to know more about this, you can take a look at that, or you can enter in Google plant-based universities, and there's people here who can coach you. You can have a Skype call with, and you can strategize about how you could do this at your school or at your university. The third thing you can do, but this is maybe for later in life or for older people in here, is donations. Donations to Swissveg or to another organization that helps them be more effective, right? And this is very important because actually if you look at donations in the world, and probably in any European country, there's only a very tiny amount of donations, a fraction of donations that goes to farmed animals. And people sometimes say, why would you donate to farmed animals when there's all this human suffering around? You could say, like, well, because nobody else is doing it. And because with my money I will have a big impact. And saying this here because Switzerland is obviously one of the richest countries in the world. Let me just compare to my country, Belgium. If in Belgium you have a median income of 25,000 euros, median means half of the people earns more than you, half earns less than you. If this is what you have in Belgium, then you are within the richest 4% of the world's population. And you are 20 times as rich as the global average, as the average. You're probably 500 times as rich as the poorest. And I'll end with the last tip, because most of you are young people. The most important thing you can do is in terms of your career choice. This is your life in months. If you get 90, this is where you die, right? This is where I am, a bit over the hill already. This is where many of you are. And you have maybe 40 years ahead of you in which you can be meaningful professionally. And in all my talks, I ask people to find a useful job that really helps the world. And not to invest in learning and in selling and in developing and in marketing solutions for non-existing problems. Things that we really don't need more of. How many more of these things, how many more versions of this do we need? You know? And still people, bright people, engineers and marketeers and psychologists are all working on these stupid things. Well, there's so big problems in the world. So my plea for you is to fill this in with something useful, something beautiful. And also, if you haven't done it yet, to take the blindfolds off when you're eating. Thank you very much. Yes?
You spoke about the fact of changing action before changing the values. So
yeah.
This can be a way to make people change. Do you have some number, for example, of how
how effective this is?
Yeah.
Well, there's no, it's hard to say this in numbers, but I could give you an example. So one example is a study where people were asked, people in the tests, in the investigation, in the research, were asked to fill out a questionnaire. A questionnaire, survey questions, about what they thought a cow is capable of in terms of emotions, in terms of cognition, and also about what they thought was the moral value of a cow. And so they split these people in two groups. And while they were answering the questions, one group got nuts to eat, and the other group got meat to eat. And when they looked at the results, they could see very clearly that the people who had eaten nuts were ascribing a lot more cognitive and emotional capacities and a lot more moral value to the cows than the people who had eaten the meat. So this is an example that shows that your behavior, even the behavior in that very act while answering the questions, influences your attitude about somebody or something, in this case. Right? So this is just one example. Conversely, we do know that if you go the other way, if you look at how people change their behavior from changing attitudes, that happens in not many cases. So there's one research that investigated the attitudes and behavior of professors of moral philosophy. And they asked professors of moral philosophy, do you think it's okay to raise and kill animals for food? And about 75% of them said, no, it's not okay, morally. These were specialists in ethics. And then they looked at how many people were actually, of them, how many people were actually vegetarian or vegan, and it was not much higher than the general population. It was just a couple of percentages. So you can see there that awareness doesn't lead necessarily to behavior. Yeah. I have more examples in my book, but I mean, it's impossible to say like in what percentage what would be effective, and I'm not saying we should choose either or, but we should be aware of the fact that it could go in both directions. Yes?
Thank you for the presentation. So at the beginning you also mentioned the fact that a lot of women were tended to be more vegan or vegetarian than men.
Mm-hmm.
You took the example of David as the counter example. And I was wondering, because we know that women tend to be socialized in a more compassionate way. Like compassion is a lot more valued in women than in men. And I was wondering if we could also think about a way to value compassion among men. And I was thinking of maybe a way to do that is maybe to, like, there is a lot of sanctuaries popping up about everywhere in the world, and maybe it's a good start to encourage the people in your surroundings, especially men, to go, I don't know, maybe like a Sunday, to go visit the sanctuary, and maybe the fact of meeting those animals and making a link is a good way to encourage this compassion to emerge.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, this compassion is what we need, right? And there's many ways to like try to make people and men more compassionate, but they have to do it. They have to be open to go to that sanctuary, and they have to be open to watch earthlings or to read eating animals by Jonathan Safran. And the thing is that they're very defended against it. I mean, people say, I don't want to watch that documentary because I know that they will have to go vegan afterwards, right? And they don't want to lose what they love to eat, basically. But yeah, I mean, if you can find ways to do that and to make, especially to make compassion a more interesting and a more respectable thing for men, for guys, that would be very good. I think it is already happening, at least in progressive circles. We are seeing that men are allowed to be more feminine. I mean, I have to be careful about generalizations, etc. here, but it is something that is happening, at least in more progressive circles, I think.
Conversely, and I don't know if this is a good strategy, but what we can also do is to show how meat substitutes and vegan eating can be very manly, right? By examples of sportsmen and the game changers, you know, the documentary, etc. But I don't know if that's just confirming a bad situation. So I'm not sure if that's a good thing. I'm gonna let this person first, and then get back to you. Okay. Yeah.
I'm really interested in any links between work towards animal rights as well as other social movements for addressing social inequalities or anti-racism.
Mm-hmm.
Can you comment on any of those parallels or linkages?
Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe one recommendation would be the book Powerarchy by Melanie Joy. So Melanie Joy is the author of Why We Love Dogs, Eat Pigs, and Wear Cows. She is a psychologist. And Powerarchy is about well, the common structures below or beneath all forms of exploitation. So this is about, you could look at all these forms of exploitation and see a power relationship everywhere, right? In domination of men over women, and white people over black people, and also humans over non-human animals, right? So there is definitely a parallel. At the same time, yeah, some people are also very wary of making too many parallels, and sometimes it can be offensive to compare, for instance, animals with suppressed people, etc. So we have to be careful. There is the hope within the animal rights movement that if we talk about these parallels, and if we include all these social justice issues in our strategy, in our communication, etc., that we would maybe be able to collaborate better with all these other social justice movements, in that they would also include animal rights among their topics. I don't know if that is a realistic strategy, but that is definitely something that many organizations and part of the movement is trying to show that it is part of a bigger problem. The downside of that is that if you create of being a vegan or being an animal rights person, if you give that a very progressive leftist image, then it becomes even more difficult for people who are not on the left and who are not progressive to adopt that lifestyle. So it has benefits and it has downsides and benefits, I think. Yeah. I hope that was a bit of an answer to the question. There's more to read about that. I mean, for instance...
I'm most interested in your personal work, actually.
In what?
In how it affects your work personally.
My work personally, yeah, so my, I'm interested and moved and affected by all of these topics, all topics where beings in general are suppressed and treated unfairly and suffering. And like my donations go both to people and to animals. But in my life, I have always emphasized, since I've been an activist since university, I've always emphasized animals for 3 reasons. The first thing is that the problem is huge. The second is that the problem is very neglected. It gets relatively little attention compared to the size and compared to the human causes. And thirdly, it is really solvable. The solution is actually quite simple. I mean, if we change our dietary habits, we can eliminate 99% of the human-caused animal suffering. So those are 3 reasons for me to really focus on that. Yes?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the
Yeah.
notion of compassion and etc. I think it's the same as the other problem I had first, when I wasn't able to find some words, but aren't you afraid that, I mean, in changing the action before the value, it implies not politicizing, can I use this word?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Yeah.
the problem. And in the end, as we saw, as you said, we can see that vegan products are not only eaten and bought in general by vegans, but also by other people. So this is good because if we want to change the action first, it means that most people are changing their way to act. But in another hand, I can feel, but maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. Capitalism have absolutely no interest in having some moral values in general. So you can see it, for example, buying T-shirts, which implies exploiting children, is something very bad. So here you have a wonderful way to buy some T-shirts who don't exploit humans, and you will be very fancy in it. And so people just change their action, but in the end they don't act for exploitation in general. So I'm afraid that in the end it will be even more difficult to put the light on the very political problem and the moral problem, because it will be more easy to be vegan, but not meaningful to be vegan for the animals. So in the end, it can help for the planet and for the health, but what about the animals?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I would say it would be good to read my book. I don't want to advertise it or anything, but that's where I explain all these things. But basically, and I agree with you, I mean, in the end, we need awareness, we need political action, we need people who care, etc. And we're not just vegan because of some consumerism or whatever. But the thing is that, and this is what I've already alluded to, the thing is that I believe that this attitude change, that really believing that something is wrong, that animals have rights, that things need to change, becomes easier when you're not so defensive anymore against the change. So I compare it sometimes with, I mean, just to give you an example that would maybe speak to you, the people, the meat eaters, they often tell us, what about the plants? Don't they have feelings, right? And we laugh at that, and this is a stupid argument, until you look at some research and some books where it says that trees and plants might be aware of more things than we have suspected. And the thing is that basically, I just want to make a parallel here. Basically, I don't want to know that. I don't want to know all that research because it would make me very uncomfortable. So the moment that I know that I have a good alternative for using plants and trees, I will want to know much easier. I will much more easily read an article about that or watch a documentary on that because I'm no longer involved, because I'm no longer complicit. And that is what I would hope, and that is what I think, and what can happen. And in every talk I give, in every training that I give, there's always people who started being vegan and who started changing their dietary habits because of health reasons. It's nothing to do with morality, but they turn up, they are at that moment animal activists. And it started for health reasons. So it can be very trivial. And so the only thing that I'm saying is, I mean, the reasons matter, but what you start out with doesn't matter so much as we think. You have something?
Yeah, I think one problem that I found is maybe mixing up the terminology between speciesism, veganism, and plant-based. And when just addressing consumption and reducing animal products, I think we should talk about plant-based. And then, for example, when linking up social issues and talking to other activists, we should address the root problem, which is speciesism. And this is also why maybe linking vegan foods to a left position might scare people away. Like, I think that if we address those things as they are in their separate context, maybe it would make more sense. Yeah. I don't know how you use this different terminology.
Yeah.
And what's your position?
I mean, one general comment on this assertion that I would make is the thing that I always advise to people who want to be active and advocates for this is to be flexible in your approach. And basically not to think that there is one approach that will be applicable and effective with everybody, but to adapt. And I think, for instance, in the university context, if you're talking here to students, this is a progressive context, hopefully as much as possible. People want to think at the university. So here is a good place to talk about speciesism and to talk about injustices, etc. Much better than, for instance, when you're talking to 55-year-old people, where it would be maybe more effective to talk about health because they're starting to feel health problems, etc. You know? So adapt your approach to whoever you are talking to. And yeah, you could change the words or the terms that you use according to the context. Yes.
Among the obstacles to phasing out growing animals to eat them, there is one you haven't mentioned, is that a lot of people think the problem cannot be fixed. And it remains to be seen if they have some rationale for that. Let's take one example. You know that in India there is a religion which refuses even to swallow insects. The Jains, they have a towel before their mouth. If you grow vegetable to make meat, you have probably to kill hundreds of billions of insects more. And today's research tells us that maybe insects, however small they are, may not be as primitive as we thought, and they might also suffer, etc. So this is an issue probably which cannot be fixed, at least not in my lifetime, but I am already half dead, but probably not even in yours or the youngest here in the room. Another example of how difficult it is to address the issue, you gave us at the start. Don't be mistaken, I am totally on your side. You know, I am so often called pig and donkey and whatever, so I have a lot of solidarity with animals. But you showed us terrible figure on the numbers, absolute numbers. But if you make the calculation per human, it's much lower than I expected. It makes, if I am not mistaken, it makes one mammal for, 2 mammals for 1,000 humans. It makes 2 chickens for 100 humans. So it's probably not more than 5,000 years ago in a village per human. I'm not sure, but you see what I mean. Yeah. So how do you react? I am not trying to discourage you, nor to say, personally, I have reduced meat consumption a lot, but very late, you know. When I was a child, once I saw a rabbit being killed in a hotel where I was on holiday, and I said, everyone, I don't want to have a rabbit, but still for 50 years then I ate all kind of meat. Yeah. But in the past, let's say 10 years, I have drastically reduced, but still I have this doubt that maybe the problem cannot be fixed. So how do you react to that?
Well, I mean, first of all, in terms of number of animals per human, we've done a calculation at some point, and our estimation for a Belgian person was if they get 82 years old and then they die, and they're an average meat eater, they would have consumed about 1,800 entire animals in their lifetime. So that's not little. But in terms of problem that cannot be solved, I think it can perfectly be solved. I think it will be solved. I mean, if you talk about insects, I mean, there's more difficult problems. There's the problem of yes, very tiny animals that we might kill in the process of cultivating vegetables for ourselves. There's animals in the wild out there who suffer as well. Those are difficult problems. But the problem of animal agriculture, and the bigger animals, the mammals and the chickens and the fish, it is relatively easy. And I can very easily imagine a future, maybe the year 2100, 2200, when we will look back and we will say like, oh my God, how was this possible? How did people do that? And people will be writing PhDs and books to try to explain how it was possible. And we can see that now. But I think it is very doable.
No, you're right. For big animals, it's doable. But if I were a mosquito, I would say how unfair it is. They care so much for...
Yeah, we'll have to tackle them in the second instance. There's one question. Yeah.
You're saying that if we're going to produce more vegetables to feed the people only with vegetables, but we're forgetting about all the vegetables we're feeding the cows now. That's much more. We're feeding the cows
Yeah,
to
yeah.
make meat,
Yeah.
but we're growing tons of
Yeah.
vegetables to feed the cows. So, I mean, once we stop feeding the cows,
Yeah, I think he means that even if we don't do that, and even if we cultivate vegetables for ourselves, we will still be killing some animals, probably. So it's hard to entirely solve it.
Riding on your bicycle,
Yeah.
you swallow mosquitoes.
Yeah.
But it's not massive.
Well, it's actually, I think it cannot be underestimated, unfortunately. Also the mouse and the rodents and the birds that get killed, it's there, it's a problem. We have to admit that. But we have to start somewhere.
We have to start also change our way of growing.
Yeah.
No monoculture. We have to do permaculture, where animals and
Yeah, there's definitely
it's in balance.
definitely more friendly methods possible.
Biodiversity.
Yes.
So I'm a medical student in 5th year, and I'm also a vegan. And to me, we have very little teaching about the link between what we eat and our health. Well, the scientific evidence is overwhelming. So in terms, speaking of cognitive dissonance, it's just unbelievable in the medical field. And I'm wondering if you have any suggestions as to what to do as a young doctor to help change that.
Yeah, I think you have a very interesting degree to help create change, or you will have an interesting degree. So there's more and more being done about that. So I mean, some initiatives are PAN is PAN is Physicians Association for Nutrition. You can join them and help spread the message, etc. There's a conference in Germany. I forget the name, but it's a conference organized by the Charité Hospital and originally ProVeg for doctors, for medical specialists about the link between animal products and health. And so it's a vegan conference basically. This would be a very interesting product to export to other countries if you haven't had any here like that in Switzerland or in the French-speaking part of Switzerland. It would be very interesting to organize at some point, I think, and you can get like a lot of, if it's the first time especially, get a lot of results with that. There could be a division of PAN started here. There's the work of medical doctors, etc., that you can help spread, like Michael Greger, people like that who have written books. There's books in German and French. More and more is being done, and I see some movement among medical professionals, and I see how they are starting to get more and more into this. Yeah. What we should not do, I think, as vegans, is to exaggerate the vegan claims. Like, you know, I call it veganomania. This is to present veganism as the solution for every health problem. That is also not true, and that is not going to make us credible in the eyes of medical professionals. Yes.
The problem is the money. It's the capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest problem. Because I read a book, it's called The Simian Factor, to join you. What we do, we take mice, we feed them what we eat, wait until they get sick, and then we try to find a solution to make them better. Instead of not making them sick.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're doing. We're making ourselves sick.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the whole system is just terrible in so many aspects. And by addressing meat consumption, we're not solving all the problems, but I think we're solving a good, or helping to solve a good many problems. Yeah. Yes?
But speaking of capitalism, we've seen big companies such as Burger King or big food chains like this who are not vegan, but who make vegan products. Do you think it's okay to support these products to show the big companies that there is a demand and there should be more of them? Or it's also supporting a company who exploits animals?
Yeah, good question. So I don't know if I would know that the succeeding of a vegan product in such a company depends on us, then I would say definitely support it. Or definitely let's not boycott it, or whatever, not call for a boycott. I don't know if it depends on us, but I think in some instances it might, because the demand is quite low in the beginning, and so vegans eating that might be a good thing. But if you don't want to do that, that's perfectly fine to me. But I do think we need these companies. If you look at companies that you consider evil, like McDonald's or whatever, there's three possibilities. They go bankrupt because they don't offer vegan products. It's not going to happen very fast. They become a vegan company. It's not going to happen very fast. So the only thing I think that can happen is that they change gradually, bit by bit. And as long as what they're doing is not greenwashing, is not like symbolic, aesthetic changes, then I think we have to applaud it. And as for thinking that you're supporting, with your money, supporting their meat business, well, it's actually the other way around right now still. And I've talked to some companies and they're saying, well, this whole vegan part of our business is not profitable yet, and we have to invest our meat money in that vegan part of the shop, right? So it's actually the other way around than most people fear it is. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I mean, on the other hand, if your ambition is to kill off capitalism, which I can understand, and I think capitalism, ideally it goes, but probably more realistically it will change a lot, or it should change a lot. If that is your ambition, I mean, then we are only confirming these companies in continuing to exist, because they just change, they don't change fundamentally, structurally, they only change in terms of what they're offering. And they will be greener and they will be more compassionate, but it will still be the same system. Personally, my opinion is I don't want to wait for the fall of capitalism to help animals, basically. But I can understand if other people think about that differently. We have to go to the next speaker, I think, right? Yes. Okay, thank you very much.